Hello? Is this Mr. Anderson?
There was no real reason for me to pick up the phone. The spam app on my cell called out the mystery number right away. But hell, I thought, screw it. There was no one else left in my life for me to talk to. Even a debt collector sounded good at the moment. My wife was murdered in 2015. There really isn't an easy way to say that, other than getting it out of the way early. It was a random robbery gone wrong. One rainy night, some sick, tweaking freak snuck into our house and shot her. The suspect was caught 2 days later and sentenced to life in prison. He still sits there today. I have worked in web development ever since. The job is remote, and the field caters to my hermit-like behavior out here in the woods of northern New Jersey. The lack of drug testing is really just an added benefit. I was perfectly free to screw up the remainder of my own life. I don't have any friends anymore. Not really. Sometimes, I guess it's easy to look for companionship in all the wrong places. Senior or junior? I replied to the lady with a sigh before settling into the armchair in my office with a bottle of wine. It was raining that night. The wind whipped the old pine tree in our backyard so hard I thought it might topple.
Senior,
said the pretty calm voice on the other line. She sounded familiar, but I blamed that notion on the half-empty bottle of wine. Apologies, ma'am, but, Senior died 6 years ago, I said, a little annoyed at the lack of record-keeping at this place. She paused.
Oh, gosh, that is not what we have here. I am so sorry, sir. We were not aware. Please forgive the intrusion and assumption. Would you mind pausing while I check my records?
A filing cabinet clicked steadily in the background as static crinkled. My guess was that the woman held the receiver to her shoulder. I chuckled a bit in the lack of audio quality. No, that is okay. No problem at all. No worries. Why don't you just start by telling me your name? I asked, cursing myself for the hint of shameless flirting at the end. She giggled. Something about that laugh was very familiar.
My name is Emily, and I work with his credit card company,
she said in a rehearsed tone.
Unfortunately, we can't divulge which firm over the phone if you are not on the account, which, you just admitted yourself, of course.
Okay.
I'm guessing that you're Mr. Henderson's son,
she mumbled while audibly thumbing through papers. Yes, ma'am, that's right, but it's been years. I could not possibly be stuck with the old man's debt, right? I asked hopefully.
Well, let's check that, shall we?
There was a panicked shuffling and opening of books in the background.
I am so sorry, sir,
she replied with a grateful tone.
The rules are in one of those 3-ring binders, and they are very difficult to find. Please hold for a moment.
That's okay. Did not know anybody still kept records that way. Do I get an email confirmation of this charge as well? I asked.
Excuse me?
Email, like electronic mail. A confirmation of the charge, I asked again, allowing my confusion to turn to frustration. What was this lady's problem?
We don't do that here. Still a few years away from all those fancy features,
she continued.
But as you know, late payments are a pretty serious issue. They can even affect the credit score of an individual when a large amount has not been paid.
Okay, of course, I said, genuinely starting to grow worried and a bit frustrated. What can I do?
Is there a Miss Henderson in the household? She asked quietly.
Miss Henderson died in 2006.
What year did you say? Oh my gosh. That is so horrible. I really am batting 1,000 today.
I gasped. That was it. That phrase. I don't know if it was the way she said it or the fact that simply not that many people used that exact language, but as soon as she did, something clicked in my memory. My wife worked for a credit card company before we met. Her name was also Emily. The voice sounded like hers, but it was younger, more hopeful than I remembered. What is your last name? I asked. The line was silent. Look, I know that's a weird question, but please, I think we know each other.
I can't give that information out,
she started. Okay, Did you go to Jefferson Memorial High School?
Yes.
She said, astonished.
How did you know that?
It was impossible. Emily was dead. The voice on the phone barely even sounded like her. It was younger, happier, more optimistic. This type of dream was actually the type of thing that had kept me up a million sleepless nights in the past. And yet I was awake. Could it be a coincidence? Is your mother's name Eva? There was silence on the other end of the line. Then her mouse-like reply confirmed my suspicions.
Who is this?
I took a deep breath. Either I understood what was happening, or I lost my mind. Might as well enjoy the ride. This next question is going to sound strange. What is today's date?
I am sorry, sir. One moment.
She paused and shuffled around some more papers. Today's date is July 9th, 1999. It was impossible. Could it be the storm? The anniversary of her death? Emily, listen to me.
Okay, sir, this conversation is getting a little strange. Let's keep it to the payment plan.
Listen to me very carefully. One day you are going to meet a man. You are going to love him, Emily, and he will love you more than you ever know. I had to give her something to remember. On your first holiday together, he will buy you one gift for all 12 days of Christmas.
Sounds dreamy.
She replied with a laugh and a sigh.
Are you one of those psychics?
I am serious. You will marry this man, Emily. He will buy you the ring you always wanted. The ceremony will be a beautiful one in your hometown. Your entire family will be there, including Aunt Zelda and your grandma from Tennessee.
I like this fortune cookie,
she said with dripping sarcasm. But 2 years later, on July 9th, 2015, you will be murdered in the home you share together. She shifted the phone nervously.
So what do I do?
First, I tried to tell her to avoid the house that day, to never date me, to stay away forever and find a better life somewhere else. But somewhere inside the middle of my rant, the line disconnected to the tune of a blood-curdling scream. I called back to find a non-working number, and she never answered again. I fell asleep listening to the thunder rolling through the sky. The scream from that night repeated from time to time while flashes of her body on the floor occasionally invaded my mind. I never questioned the call. I never asked why. Maybe it was God. Maybe it was just time. But yesterday morning, when I woke up, Emily was by my side. I mean, I was never a heavy addict or anything. Never did heroin or meth. Tried crack cocaine once. That was, yeah. But I was only sober for 8 months between that. And when Eddie, an old buddy of mine, introduced me to something called K3, against my better judgment, I took him up on the offer. You heard of K2, bro? He said. He was already high. Spice? Yeah. Synthetic weed. Well, listen, man. I blinked. I looked at our mutual friend Todd, then back at Ed. Listen what? What? You said, well, listen, man, and then you spaced out. Oh, what were we talking about? K3? Oh, right. You heard of K2? Yes, I just said that. He leaned in close. Well, listen, man. This stuff is like K2 and then some. Hence the name K4. I thought you said it was K3. Todd stepped in. Okay, ignore him. He's gone. This isn't synthetic anything, Kev. It's something new. Then why did he call it K4? K3. Then why did he call it K3? He calls it that because the high reminds him of being on spice or something. But this crap is like on another level. Man, it ain't cannabinoid nothing. I shifted in my seat. Okay, I mean, you remember what happened last year, yeah? Yeah, no, I got you. Listen, though, I've done this stuff 4 times already. Haven't had one bad trip yet. First trip, I was just like, high off my ass. Nothing made sense. Second trip, I was like an astronaut, bro. I think I saw what exists outside the universe. Okay, what exists outside the universe? I said I saw it. Not that I remember it, but it was wild. I was warming up to the idea. How long does the high last? Depends on the hit and the quality. He held up a small bag of pills. And you know me, man. I only got the best. Muffin, his dog, growled from the other side of the room. Muffin, hey, down, girl. Is she okay? She's fine, dude, he said. She's fine, dude, echoed Eddie. Then he started laughing. Is he on this stuff now? Took it right before you got here. I wanted someone to be sober enough to explain it to you. Thanks. Thank yourself, person, you blittering snarch, Eddie said. Then he resumed laughing. Thanks, Ed. Todd popped his pill in his mouth. I did the same. After a moment, he said, How are you feeling? Me? Fine. How long does it take to kick in? He smiled. Should be feeling it momentarily, my dude. Muffin started growling again. Todd clapped once. Muffin! Shush, girl, come on. I looked at her. She was standing in her crate, baring teeth. The hair on her back stood on end. I don't think she's okay, man. She's fine. Ed, you good? I looked. Eddie was face down in the cushions of the couch. He wasn't laughing anymore. He was shivering. I said, Are we going to get cold or something? I usually don't, Todd said. Every hit's different and every person's different. All I know is it's freaking fun. Okay. Ed didn't look like he was having much fun. He doesn't look like he's having much fun, I said. Yeah, well, you know how your friends can be, sweetie, said my mom. I know, Mom. What? I said, I know, Mom. I'm not your mother, said Pastor Lewis. Oh, I said, sorry. He leaned in from where Todd had been. He looked concerned, disappointed, had his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped between them. Kevin, you know you shouldn't be doing this. I know. Especially after what happened last year. What were you thinking? Thought I could handle it, I guess. I stared at the floor. The way the colors on the carpet swirled in and out was always so mesmerizing. It's going to be a bad trip, you know. I looked up. Pastor Lewis had on that old evil smile he always had. Or did he? I furrowed my brow. What?
It's going to be a bad trip,
he said again in a deeper voice.
Todd said all the trips he had were fun. That doesn't mean it's impossible to have a bad one.
Oh, Pastor Lewis doesn't sound like that. Man, who the hell is Pastor Lewis? Said Pastor Lewis in Todd's voice. I blinked. Todd was sitting there, looking at me like I'd lost my mind. I cleared my throat but couldn't feel it. My old youth pastor from back in the day, I said. Muffin barked from her kennel. It was a deafening alien-sounding bark. Gravelly, dark. I looked over at her. She looked at me. She barked again, but this time didn't open her snout to do so. Whoa, I said. What? Said Todd. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. Cool how your dog can bark without moving her mouth. Can you sit down? You're weirding me out. Yeah, sorry, Pastor Lewis said before sitting down and becoming Todd. Then Todd said, laughing hysterically, I am sitting, man. He was sitting indeed. I looked up. Nobody on the ceiling, and no indication that anyone had been. He was doubled over with laughter, howling, aching laughs. He held his stomach. Is it that funny? It ain't that, Todd said. The spiders in your ears are singing. I smiled. Oh yeah? What are they singing? Todd couldn't stop laughing long enough to respond, but he didn't need to. I could hear it too. Dude, I said. It's the song from Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. Todd laughed even harder. Man, what? Man, what? You spelled it wrong, my dude. What? Go back. You spelled dwarves wrong. It should be dwarves, not dwarves. What the hell is a dwarf? I scrolled up. There it was. Dwarves. Huh? That's weird. Huh. that is weird. Todd was still laughing, far harder and longer than the situation warranted. How am I seeing words I spoke? I asked. I grabbed at the R in dwarves so I could rearrange the word, but the R slapped me just as Muffin barked again. Bark smack, just like that. A single bark. Sounded like Satan. I sat back down. Easy there, dwarves, I said. I'll just spell it right next time, damn. Make sure you do, said Muffin. One by one, the letters comprising the words dwarves headed out the kitchen window. Dude, I said. Todd, the letters are escaping. Stop the letters. Stop the letters.
I can't hear you, bro,
said Todd in Pastor Lewis's voice. Or Pastor Lewis in Todd's voice. Who were they again? Nah, hell. Whoever it was said, come downstairs. I am downstairs, I said, before stubbing my toe on his bedroom dresser. I took a step back. I was in his bedroom upstairs. That place was a wreck. Wait, how did I... Come downstairs, said Muffin, demonically. I couldn't see her, but somehow I knew she was standing at the bottom of the stairs, on two legs, with her head upside down. You know when you just know a dog will look like that? It was one of those times. That's okay, I said. I like it up here. I pulled one of his dresser drawers out, dumped out all his underwear and condoms, and put it on my head for protection. No way you're getting me now. I sat down on his bed, but his bed was on the other side of the room. Ow, I said, sitting on his floor. It hurt my ass. Go downstairs, said Muffin. From so close behind me, she must have been inside my head. Get out of my head, I said. The power of the dresser drawer compels you. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. Hey! He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. Stop it! He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. Stop repeating that sentence. What sentence? Said Todd. He was in his room. At least, I think he was. I don't know, man. I blinked again. He wasn't there. I could hear him laughing downstairs hysterically. Holy crap, I could hear myself say. I sounded distant, underwater. I am not in control right now. I started crawling towards the hallway, and he was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. I shoved this sentence aside. The letters crashed into the wall and melted. I kept crawling, but now my hands were getting stuck in the quicksand. Aw, crap, I said. Here we go. I made it to the door, but the dresser drawer on my head was too wide. I turned it the other way, the only possible solution to that problem, and went for the stairs. Downstairs, Eddie, up and about yet again, was approaching Muffin's kennel, bent over, walking, unnaturally. Wide-eyed, mouth open, out of his mind. Muffin was howling and barking hysterically, but also silently. That's weird, I said. It's gonna be a bad trip, said Pastor Lewis. You already said that, Pastor Lewis. I'm asking why I can't hear Muffin bark. It's gonna be a bad trip, he said again. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. Why is everything repeating? I asked aloud. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. It's gonna be a bad trip, he said again. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. Why is everything repeating? I asked aloud. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. Why? Why is everything repeating? I asked aloud. Drink water, bro, said Todd. He handed me a glass. And I tried to drink it upside down. The water spilled into the swirling vortex that was his floor. Oh man, I said. I lost the water. Where did you have it last, sweetie? Said Mom. I looked at the empty glass. I can't remember. Hey, Roy Rogers, what did I do with my water, man? Did I eat it? Roy Rogers didn't respond. He was too busy floating on an upside-down chair that was attached to the ceiling. Snarch, said his chair. Roy Rogers, who is also my Uncle Mo, tipped his hat. Let me know if you find it, I said. I could have sworn I had it. Ah! It's gonna be a bad trip, you know. Why am I just now hearing Muffin barking? That was like an hour ago. I looked over. Eddie had picked up her kennel, with her still inside, and was holding it above his head. She was consumed in absolute and utter panic, and he was trying to eat the entire crate. He unhinged his jaw to fit it inside, revealing exactly 14,543 razor-sharp teeth the size of railroad spikes. Ed, stop it! I heard myself say, I said. I squeezed my eyes shut and shook my head. Ed, stop, I heard myself say. Why? His face was static, like when you turn on your TV to a channel you don't own. Ed, put her down and get that static off your face. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. What? Eddie said. He dropped the kennel. Muffin yelped. I don't know, man, I said. Your voice is all staticky, like when you turn your TV to a channel you don't own. My face is static? Eddie said through the static. He started clawing at it. And who's crawling on the ceiling, looking down at you in a way that should have broken his neck? That sentence seemed out of place. I heard the words, but didn't see them coming from Eddie's mouth. In fact, Eddie wasn't even standing there anymore. He was in the kitchen, getting a knife. Crap. It's gonna be a bad trip, you know. Shut up, Pastor Lewis. I know that now. Eddie started swiping the knife in front of his face. Get off me, Static, he said. Get off me, Static! I put the knife down. Ed, stand up. Wait. No. I stood up. Eddie knifed putting the set down. Damn it. I stood up. Ed put the knife down. There we go. It's gonna be a bad trip, you know. I turned around. Pastor Lewis was at the top of the stairs. But it wasn't Pastor Lewis. It was a perfectly black figure. Pastor Lewis, black is slimming on you. Come upstairs, said the figure. It didn't sound like Pastor Lewis anymore, but it did sound like static, almost as if the static had formed itself into words. I can't. I have to save my friend from the static knife. Come upstairs, said the figure. Come upstairs. Come upstairs. Come upstairs. Come upstairs. Come upstairs. Come stairs up. Come stairs. Stairs. ceilings, ceilings. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck, nark, bark, bark, bark. Get off of me, Static. 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 Yo, who the hell is Pastor Lewis? He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. Come upstairs, dwarf, sweetie. It's gonna be a bad trip, you know. No. I was falling. I realized. Falling. And it was hot. Wherever this endless tunnel was, it was dark and hot. That's a bad combination, usually, isn't it? I haven't been in many dark and hot places, but having experienced it, I can say I'd much rather be in bright, cool places. Help me, I said. I felt asphalt. Help me! I'm falling! Now I saw lights coming on from the side of the pit. Come upstairs, said a single voice from behind me that was also Todd, Pastor Lewis, Eddie, and my mother at once. This isn't a bad trip, Kevin, the voice continued. It's real, and you know that. What you thought was real was the trip. Time, space, those are illusions. This is what exists behind the veil. This is the nothingness that exists outside the universe. This is the nothingness that awaits you at the end. No! Falling. Get him to his feet. Come upstairs and get that thing off his head. Come upstairs. Join the static. 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 Bark. Are you okay? I blinked. Hey, kid, said the officer. You okay? I looked around. I was lying in the street. Concerned neighbors, police cars everywhere. Most were in front of Eddie's house. Muffin whimpered in her crate next to me. What happened? Well, you're out here screaming, I'm falling, no, with a dog kennel and a dresser drawer on your head and no shoes. I was hoping you'd tell me. I think I was saving Muffin, I said. Who's Muffin? The dog? Yeah. Saving her from what? My friend was going to kill her, I think. Then he tried to cut his face off because it was all static. Holy hell. My now sober brain processed unsober words. Oh man, that stuff was insane. Yeah, I'd say that's a fair assessment, dummy. You're lucky you didn't jump off the roof. Can you stand? The officer helped me to my feet. I stumbled towards his car. Wait, I said. What happened to Todd and Eddie? Are they okay? He looked at me. No, kid. They're not okay. This is why you don't mess with this stuff. Now we have to clean up what's left. Sit there. He went off to talk to the other officers and the paramedics. Crud. Paramedics? 2 gurneys. Ambulance. I came to a full 36 hours later in my own bed. As I later found out, Eddie did succeed in getting the static off of his face, along with the rest of his face. And the last time I heard of Todd, he was in a straitjacket. Muffin was given to the shelter, and then to another family. So there's some good news at least. As for myself, I was told the effects might never wear off. I didn't believe them at first. I mean, who would? And how do you even process that kind of news? Hell, I don't know. All I know is that the black figure is still standing at the end of my hallway asking me to join it. I can still hear static. I've never posted like this before, but I suppose I've never needed to. If you've read the title, you know what to expect. And you can move on if you'd like to avoid the topic. I'll understand. Grief is a funny thing. Professor Farina taught me that in the first class I ever took for my undergrad, and I never understood it until now. For my wife, it's turned into unreasoning anger. She's downstairs right now, no doubt cursing my name. For me, it seems to have manifested in needing to keep myself busy. But I've run out of piles to organize and surfaces to clean, and so I've come here to write down the whole story of my son's life. I apologize in advance for rambling, but it's all so fresh and raw right now that I need to work myself up to the actual event. My greatest failure. My idol, Skinner, once said, "A failure is not always a mistake. It may simply be the best one can do under the circumstances. But I feel I have made a great many mistakes." When my son was born, it was like I finally had found my calling. Yes, I'd had jobs before, even what I thought was a respectable and long-term career. But nothing had ever captured my interest. Nothing had ever engaged my waking and sleeping mind, like that tiny, cherubic face. We'd planned to leave Isaac with her parents 4 days a week, so that she could soon resume her job and I could continue mine without interruption. But a week of paternity leave was far too short for me, and so I decided that we could forgo some of the creative comforts that 2 incomes would allow. I decided to become a stay-at-home dad. The university wasn't too thrilled about losing a tenure track professor, but I was adamant. I'd finish out the semester, and that would be the end of my career in academia. Did it sting a little bit to abandon my hard-earned degree and former dream job? Of course. But it was the pain of trading a rare treasure for a unique one. Many people have degrees in psychology. Many people hold professorships. But Isaac was one of a kind. Let somebody else be the next James Olds. I had found a higher purpose. It proved to be a good thing that I convinced my wife to let me stay home. Isaac proved to have a challenging childhood, and he needed a guiding hand. As a newborn, he had been tuberic. As an infant and toddler, he proved rather less agreeable. Years of studying and even teaching human development classes had not prepared me as thoroughly as I had expected. There were days when I wondered whether or not I was fit to be a parent. And I'll admit now that in my heart of hearts, there were days when I regretted my choice to leave my job. Only for short bursts, and always followed by the deepest regret. But there it is. The pure and unvarnished truth: I was not, a perfect father. When I had just about reached my breaking point, when the thought of another day of tantrums and diapers and bone-deep weariness was too much to bear, Isaac turned a behavioral corner. It came right after a terrible fright, the only real injury he ever suffered in his life. His mother always thought that when he fell and bumped his head so hard he needed stitches, it must have knocked something loose. I didn't think it was quite so drastic as that, but there was a marked improvement from that day forward. And although I could never have stayed mad at him for long, I was even more lenient as long as he had that hangdog look in those bruised eyes. In fact, having been afraid for even a moment of losing him, I could hardly bear to discipline him at all. Luckily, I rarely had any call to do so. As the terrible twos faded into memory, Isaac grew into the model child. His tantrums disappeared, and the willful and stubborn young boy became as tractable as any parent could hope. He ate his vegetables, cleaned his room, he put away his toys, and he made my life as a father an endless parade of delight. Seeing his bright young smile first thing in the morning never failed to bring an answering smile to my face. I was worried, I'll admit, that he would change as he grew older and went to school. My wife called me a mother hen, half teasing and half exasperated with my worrying. After a year of public school, though, she began to agree with me. Our well-behaved son was in danger of reverting into the little hellion who had so exhausted us years prior. I don't know why she worried about it. After all, I had more than a little experience in education myself and was perfectly qualified to homeschool. I think perhaps she thought that his emotional and social growth would be stunted if we pulled him from the public school system. It was not. If anything, he flourished even more as a home student than he had in the years prior to formal schooling. I made sure to bring him often to homeschool groups and social gatherings and tried to let him maintain those friends he had developed in his years in the system. And in terms of scholarship, he excelled. It was soon obvious to me that Isaac was gifted, and that those gifts would have been squandered in a formal classroom. Seeing how much he enjoyed learning warmed my educator's heart. While other children tolerated school and lived for cartoons and video games and reckless play, my boy loved nothing so much as sitting and reading, exploring whole universes with the same eagerness as some children explore dirty puddles and dangerous forests. And not just mindless novels or frivolous adventure stories. He read books of history, of poetry, of science. Isaac enjoyed learning for learning's sake. He was everything I had ever hoped to find in a student, and I cannot express how glad I was that such a student could be crafted from my own flesh and blood. As the years wore on, my son continued to develop into exactly the man I had hoped he would be. He never drank, never smoked, never tried drugs, and only very rarely rebelled at all, a few times staying out after curfew, a brief dalliance with a local girl. Of course, a little youthful rebellion is a normal thing, and I tolerated it as a necessary price for him to have a well-adjusted adolescence. My wife and I would listen with horror to the stories our friends told of their own screaming fights with hormone-riddled teenagers, with children who had become strangers to them, and nod with feigned sympathy. More than once, on the ride home from whatever dinner or gathering we'd been to, she would turn to me and say simply, "We are very, very blessed." When Isaac was beginning to think about college, he initially considered working towards a psychology degree. I was unenthusiastic about the idea, and he noticed. I know that he considered it a high form of compliment to want to follow in my footsteps, and I took it as such. But I told him frankly that I had found my degree to be so much wasted time, that it was a meaningless piece of paper, and that he would be better served working at a McDonald's where at least they'd teach him a few employable skills. He took it as well as could be expected, and threw himself into a physics degree with a gusto. My wife was surprised that he had stayed at a local college when he had so many offers from prestigious schools all around the world. But I explained the logic in it to her. Why spend all that money to go to another part of the world and be so busy with schoolwork that he wouldn't be able to enjoy it? Better to stay at home, save some money, and go on a well-earned trip around the world when the degree was earned. Even if his field of study was not my own, he continued to echo my life in every way that counted. A brilliant scholar who reached the top of his class early and stayed there for all 4 years. He earned distinctions and accolades the way that lesser students earned demerits and police reports. By the time he was done with his junior year, he had all the subject area credits he needed to graduate and had taken most of the available electives besides. Maybe that was the cause. Could it be that his own enthusiasm, his own overwhelming urge to learn, was the reason for everything that came later? I hope not. Dear God, I hope not. Whether or not it was, my son had his senior year to fill as he saw fit. Maybe it was a lingering thread of his earlier desires. Maybe it was a desire to emulate me still further. Maybe it was a pure accident of fate. A pretty girl mentioning a class she was taking. A coin flip. A split-second decision. Whatever the reason, he took a psychology elective this spring. A class about substance abuse. By the time I heard about it, it was past the period to drop it easily, and he was unwilling to put a blemish on an otherwise spotless record, and I was unwilling to force the issue. Of course, I tried to convince him, to cajole him, to drop the class, but when he pressed me for reasons why he should bother, I had none to give, so I let the matter rest. I had never made a worse mistake. I heard all about the class for the first few weeks of the semester. For his whole college career, Isaac had been more than happy to spend time with his mother and I, and to regale us with stories from his time at school. We were so proud of him. I was so proud. But in February, something changed. His talks grew shorter and colder, and soon stopped altogether. By early last month, my son seldom left his room while at home. When he did, any conversations we had were stilted and awkward. A wall had grown between us, and I couldn't understand it. My wife dismissed it as senioritis or a long overdue display of teenage pique. I was not so sure. My boy was perfect. He was beyond such things. She and I agreed that if it continued past spring break, the first spring break he had ever spent away from home, we would talk to him about it. We would get our son back, she said. And I believed her. I really thought I could do it, that no matter the problem, I could overcome it. But Isaac never came back from spring break. All that came to us from those sunny southern shores were frantic phone calls, a police report, a cold body, and sealed letters. My wife and I laid him to rest in a small private ceremony a week and a half ago. As I gave the eulogy, I couldn't help but cry about what we had lost. Not just my son as he was, the light of my life, but the man he might have been. After many tears and brutal self-recriminations, my wife and I finally opened the envelopes that held our son's last words to us. The one addressed to me was written for my eyes only, but I'll copy it here for you. The words are too much for me to bear alone. Dad, my first memory of you is a happy one. You're holding me tight and comforting me, stopping my tears and reassuring me that everything would be okay. That's been my memory of you for basically forever. The one person I can turn to who would make everything okay. The one person who would stand up for me and protect me no matter what. I wanted to be just like you, and you wanted me to be even better. That's why you pushed me, I think. In some twisted way, I think you honestly believed, maybe you even still believe, that everything you did was for my benefit. I know, Dad. I know what you did. Remember how hard you tried to convince me to drop substance abuse? I didn't really question it at the time, even if I didn't understand. I just wasn't raised to question you, but I get it now. The first time we learned about what heroin did for the brain, I was confused. Because that pure rush, that pulse-pounding, oh hell yeah euphoria, that sounded too damn familiar. I had it all the time. Every time I cracked open a book, every time I aced a test, every time I cleaned up after myself or mowed the lawn or did what you asked, I got the exact rush that the book described, as a result of an incredibly powerful opiate. I thought maybe I was making my own natural responses out to be more intense than they really were, so I looked into some more. And person after person, documentary after documentary, convinced me that I wasn't imagining it. So I thought maybe I was some kind of freak of nature with a really strong natural reward system. Maybe. But a reward system that favored studying and eating healthy as strongly as heroin and sex? That's pretty freaking unlikely. I know you're probably surprised to see me swearing. I'm surprised to be writing it, believe me. It's not how you raised me. The thing is, Dad, I'm trying really damn hard not to care how you raised me. I had a CT scan done just to check for any abnormalities. And what did they find? No tumor, no overdeveloped pituitary gland, nothing unusual except for the big damn bunch of wires plugged into my brain. I called Mom and asked her if I had ever had brain surgery as a kid. I was freaking out, but I wanted to think that I was wrong, that something could explain this. But no, she said. Never. Just some stitches from when I fell down as a toddler. That Dad could tell me more about it, since he was there. The doctor wanted me to go to the police, or to stay so they could run some more tests. I told them I had to think about it, and I did. But I've thought about it now, and I've decided something. I don't know who I am. My whole life you've been pressing a button and zapping my brain into thinking it was happy whenever I did something that made you happy. Clean my room? Zap. Wash the dishes? Zap. Did my homework? Zap. And little by little, you molded me into the perfect little tin soldier of a son. Am I everything you ever wanted, Dad? Am I as perfect as you hoped I'd be when you shoved this freaking thing in my head? I don't know who I am. I'm your puppet. You killed whoever I was supposed to be, whoever I should have been. You killed me and replaced me with whoever the hell I am now. No. No more. I don't know if I've ever decided anything for myself in my whole freaking life. But I'll decide on this much: when to end it. I hope you burn in hell. So now you see my pain. I dreamed many dreams for my son. I knew he could be anything when he was come of age, but I never thought he'd be ungrateful. Everything he had, all of his success, all of the bad choices he avoided, that was because of me, because there was somebody there to guide him, to steer him away from danger and toward a better path. All I wanted was for him to be as good as he could be, the best him that he could be. All I wanted was to give him a push in the right direction. And at the end of the day, when I first thought of it, all I really wanted was for him to stop crying so much. Well, there it is, the cause of all my tears and all my wife's rage. I think in his letter to her, he told her what I had done. She burned it, so I can't be sure. But she came after me with a pair of scissors just after reading it, so he must have told her something. She's downstairs now in the basement. It's strange, while I was writing, I hardly heard her. But now that I'm almost done, her cries and screams are almost overwhelming. She blames me for what happened to our son, for what he did to himself. But she'll understand my point of view in time. When she wakes up from the surgery, she'll learn to forgive me.